switched over.
over.
Yeah, it switched over.
And we weren't going to take English songs and make French lyrics for them.
Uh-huh.
You know, to us, that was a violation.
Uh-huh.
To mix up those things and to lose that purity was a violation. But if you write a new song and certain phrases, one of them works well in English and another works well in French, sing them both in the same song.
Yeah.
You know, if it leads you to do that, don't for some external rule prevent that creative expression.
Right.
So, you know, songs on Bayou Ruler, like Les Mon Cornet, it's got lyrics in French and in English.
Right. So there's this intangible calculus, though, you go through with every step of this negotiation as to who we are, what we can do.
Yeah, but you know, a lot of it happens after the fact, after the creative impulse, after you get this feeling of what you want to do creatively, then you have to sort of find ways to spin it.
Right. Okay. Okay.
But there's still some sense of there being rules.
Uh-huh.
There's things that are tacky, that are not artistic, and all of those rules are based on someone like Steve and David listening to Belton Richard, and listening to all the swamp pop all the old swamp pop guys. I mean, they are true scholars of Louisiana music, and of the best Louisiana music. The music that has made the most impact on the culture. And so there's a purity to the process there, an authenticity to the process there that I'm completely confident in.
Because one thing I'm not sure that the Playboys have ever done, I could be wrong on this, I'm not a scholar of your records, and I only know a couple of them well, but I don't think the Playboys have ever covered an English language song, just an English language pop or rock song. You've covered lots of old traditional Cajun songs that have been done through the decades, and you've written your own English language songs. I'm referring to you in the present tense, I know that's wrong, but I don't think they've ever covered taken a song that has been recorded in English and is not a French lyric and recorded it.
Into French?
Recorded it in English. You know, they've never played Satisfaction. They've never, to give an absurd example, but, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever happened, but where it's happened is in the Little Band of Gold project.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's tons of that going on, though, on stage for the Playboys.
Oh, okay.
You know, we were doing songs like You Never Can Tell and
okay.
7 Nights to Rock.
Okay, so they've done Louisiana-based swamp pop songs. That's and I've noticed on later albums, I think Bayou Ruler may be the first record in which I saw the word swamp pop among the litany of things you do on the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
You responded so immediately. That was clearly something that everybody thought about.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a real swamp pop renaissance going on, and Steve and David, in a way, have been part of the leadership of that.
Right. You know, it's funny. When I first started talking to Ken Irwin at length about anything, I remember him saying to me he wanted to find a swamp pop Beausoleil.
Right.
He also wanted to find a conjunto Beausoleil. Just somebody who could get out there and play for the others, put on a show, but present this traditionally based music, which is, and Little Band of Gold beat them to it, and went to Shanachie, and I don't know how well that's done. The project seems to be rolling along. They're playing this weekend, which you guys know,
Yeah, and the thing I would say about Little Band of Gold is that that so far there's not a lot of new sort of emergence of creativity. It'd be interesting if they really start committing to that and like writing new stuff and
time's got to be a factor.
Interpreting new things.
How would you, as you wanted to go beyond Louisiana and get bookings, was there a cluster of people, an organizational framework within which you'd work, whether it be folk festivals, folk groups, the folk world, the art centers? People have told me in other venues, Bruce Molsky has talked to me about who he worked with, and he always booked himself, and doing old time, he still books himself, I believe, and doing old time music. He tapped into certain networks as part of the folk establishment. Did that hold true for you?
Yeah.
In the Playboys?
Yeah. Our first agency came through connections that I originally made when I worked for Joe Wilson.
Uh-huh.
In other words, booking the National Folk Festival, becoming familiar with some agents, and then going back to them once I was in Louisiana, and reestablishing those connections and getting to a person who saw the opportunity. So, yeah, there's this network, and a lot of it for us all goes back to the network that Dewey set up. You know, and that goes back to the Bullfrog brothers making those first inroads. In real business terms, all of those connections exist because of the Bullfrog brothers. The names on people's Rolodex, to know who to call for certain kinds of music, this or that. In some ways, some connections would come through academic channels, like through Barry Osley. Some festival in Nova Scotia or something calls him and says, who's the best Cajun band right now? And he would call Steve and leave a message on Steve's machine. And, you know, like that circuit begins.
Right.
And agency-wise, it can be traced through that same lineage. Now, a lot of the early sort of festival marquee sort of gigs that happened for the band, I think, were an aspect of being on Rounder. You know, of being the flavor of the month from Louisiana that Rounder got to every public radio station in the country.
Right.
A certain amount of legitimacy that made a promoter say, yeah, I'll go with this band, not just because it was the only band they heard of from Louisiana, but if Rounder had chosen them, that means they must be one of the better bands right now. So there was a fair amount of work that happened that way initially for the band in the first 3 years or so.
Okay.
And my hope was to take every single one of those contacts and collect them and leverage them for later work, and make direct contacts in the future with these people, so that more regular work could happen. We could capitalize on a big festival appearance in Salt Lake City to then come through 6 months later and play a club,
Right.
where people paid a cover charge.
Yeah.
And that was a big hurdle for that band to and they're still dealing with that. We'll get hired on boogie down festivals that are free, or that you get to see 10 bands for $5 or something like that.
But you get paid. Do you care? I mean, if you're getting your price, do you care, or does that affect your price?
Well, it's a lot less. You get your price, but a lot of times you can only do those festivals once every couple of years.
I see.
So that there's no repetitive
Yeah.
work, and also you're not the focus.
Okay.
It's less focused on you as a feature artist. You sell
Whole
fewer
scene.
records,
Yeah.
all of those things.
Yeah.
So to transfer from that kind of an appearance into 6 months later, let's come through and play a club where there's a $10 cover. How are we going to get people in to see us in that sort of situation? And that was the puzzle that I was constantly working on, market by market, town by town. Some towns were easier because they had a dance promoter that was just like an amateur enthusiast of Louisiana music who wanted to run dances.
Right.
And it started turning into a regular thing. And
So you would get, I was going to ask you about that, because there are Cajun music clubs in cities. I assume you've encountered them. I know there was a big scene in the Bay Area, and it was organized. There's a website for it.
Yeah, probably one of the best examples is guy Robert Quasha in Atlanta.
I've heard of him.
Right, you know, he rents a Knights of Columbus Hall. He was having sometimes 2 dances a week when things were going really well for him. He's pulled back a bit now, but he had his own sound system. He had a mailing list. He was highly organized, and we were sometimes getting 500-600 people a night playing in Atlanta at $10-12 a head.
He does something else to make money, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's basically an amateur.
Right.
An aficionado, yeah.
This is the thing he does for fun.
Yeah.
And so there were people like that in a lot of other towns that weren't quite as successful. But there were people in New York who did that, Philadelphia, and Chicago, San Francisco, LA. That was a circuit that was the big money maker for us that we could tap into and hit each of those towns every 6 months and draw really well, sell records.
What did a guy like, how do you pronounce Quasha?
Robert Quasha.
How do you spell his name, do you know?
Kwasha.
Okay. What did a guy like that want? What demands did, and I'm using him as an exemplar because his name came up, but any of these other amateur self-designated Cajun music promoters who are fans, who want to hear Cajun music, that's why they're contacting you. What kind of, would you get demands from Quasha or from Quasha equivalents elsewhere and negative feedback about what you play or not play and what you can play if he's going to book you again?
To tell you the truth, someone that was so knowledgeable about the music and was hearing so many bands, we didn't ordinarily get heat from him because he knew the music well enough not to make those stupid mistakes of, you know, Louisiana music's supposed to all be traditional.
Right.
So it wasn't so much promoters like that. And he was really on our side, an advocate. I think the places that we did get it from some other dance promoters who, like, if they got complaints from their dancers, their regulars, that I just wish that band had played more dance music, then we'd hear a little bit about it. But for the most part, that scene was so respectful of the band. They didn't dare say something to Steve about the content. Actually, Steve told me about a festival they played a couple months ago. He said, yeah, the guy's paying good money, but he said, he brought it up to me and said, you know, we really need you to play traditional at this festival because that's what our audience wants. And Steve was, you know, slightly incensed. And I asked him how it went. He said, oh, it was fine. Because the band has the capacity at any time to play 8 hours of traditional Cajun music.
The other thing I don't know that they could or should forget, and it's not my place to say it, but is that it can be wonderful music.
Oh, yeah.
If people like it, and if you like it, is there always a problem?
Oh, I swear, it's such a double-edged sword because the band still, I mean, they deeply love Cajun music.
Yeah.
And there'd be a lot of times where we'd go out and we'd play gigs, and I'd be back there on bass, and I'd feel relieved because I knew the audience at this particular gig, they weren't going to have any problems with us playing some more of our contemporary stuff.
Right.
And Steve would get in a mood, and everything would be Mamu 1989, all the old stuff, traditional stuff you'd be getting into, like, wow, we haven't played that tune in 5 years. Play all this old stuff, and I'd be like, you know, last night, when the audience really wanted the old stuff, he was playing all the contemporary stuff. And now, it's like he had this sixth sense of, I'm not going to do what the audience wants. I'm going to challenge them always. I'm not going to just hand them on a platter exactly what they think they want.
Does he call the shots on stage in terms of those things? When he's the front man, but that's an audience. I gather that's something that was bestowed upon him from without, from what I've read. But somebody, I guess, has to give you the cues when you're on stage about which direction. You don't have a set list, or didn't it? Again, I'm talking the present tense. Did you guys work? You guys didn't work on a set list entirely,
Actually,
did you?
maybe 3 or 4 years ago, consistently pressuring Steve, and as the band got much more sophisticated in the instrument changes,
You had to have
and
some, yeah.
then and for stage shows, anytime we were at a festival, it's like we needed a set list,
Uh-huh.
and for the most part, he would stick to it.
Okay.
And he's gotten kind of disappointingly dependent on the set list.
I see.
And on patterns of, like, groupings of songs that
Okay.
always follow each other.
Right.
And so lately when I've been talking on the phone with him, I'm like, man, you should go back to the old days when you just called songs.
But he would do that. That would be his role.
Yes.
He would direct. You
And
need
very much-
one guy, I would assume.
Yeah,
Say what
and
you're doing next.
against other band members' wishes, it's sometimes,
Okay.
you know, total authority on it.
All right.
And we'd have to follow.
So you hash that out outside, off the stage. in meetings. I've read, just as an aside, I mean, I've read, I think the Rolling Stones, they'll go out with, and Bruce Springsteen perhaps, where have I read this? Dylan certainly, this might be the source of it initially. He'll go out with groupings. The groupings are very rigid.
Mm-hmm.
He'll call the first song. The band has to know what are the two songs that follow that,
Mhm.
but then he'll call another grouping. So he calls the set, but he's got it arranged in patterns,
Mhm.
and he
Yeah.
calls which pattern you follow. So he can vary it as he's feeling, and just to keep it varied.
Right.
A reviewer in one city isn't going to write about the same lead-off song as a reviewer in the next city.
Right. Yeah, and from the outside, just looking at it quickly, it looks
It's a different set. Yeah.
It looks random, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Right. Like radio playlists, I guess.
Right.
I'd like to talk about Rounder. Just again, I'm feeling this calculus of we should,
Yeah.
we have to move along, and you got to. What does a record company do for you? At least a record company like Rounder, which is a different record company than Swallow. What does a
Mhm.
Rounder do for the band? You've alluded to some things, but virtually just being on Rounder gives you a certain cachet. But beyond that, beyond the presence on the label, the workhorse stuff, what do you expect? That moves into your memo to Ken that I had. What do you expect a record company to do for you, and what's smart and what's not smart? We'll get into Rounder particularly.
Well, I think the thing that the artist, first of all, that takes for granted that the label is going to do
Mhm.
is they just magically make the studio and the tape and all these expenses not the artist's problem.
Uh-huh.
In other words, they provide the capital.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times the artist is oblivious to that whole operation. They might not even know what the final bill was. I know for probably the first 3 or 4 records the band did, Rounder directly billed with the studio. We just had no idea.
You weren't with? Were you with those records? Were you with the first two as a sideman even?
No.
No, you weren't on those records, all right?
So,
And that's what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Okay.
it was, for me to take charge of the budget was kind of a big thing, and I don't think that happened until like La Toussaint.
It's interesting because I've heard from other people that Rounder just gave them money and said, "Go make a record," or "Go make a record and send the bill to us. This is your budget." Maybe they felt Steve was too young.
Yeah, I
and
think it
experienced
was.
to do that with.
It was a pattern that was established a lot with the traditional Cajun bands,
Uh-huh.
where they just paid the studio directly.
Okay.
Um,
Who would keep control over how much time the band was using? Because Rounder didn't always have a rep on there. Ken's not credited as producer of any of the Playboys records. He's producer on some records.
yeah, for some of those early records,
Who'd watch the clock?
Al Tharp was sort of the producer.
Okay.
Not sort of, he was the producer.
Mhm.
And he watched the clock, and he probably had he had to have some sense of what the budget was.
Okay.
But of course, the budget that we had, we usually overran it by several $1,000s with each succeeding record. It was
Right.
like this inflation.
Can you give me a sense of what we're talking about here? I've gotten it from old-timey and stuff. What would a La Toussaint cost? What would a Happy Town or a Bayou
Well,
cost
Like,
to get your masters
you
done?
know, it was supposed to cost us around, like for the first contract, each record was supposed to cost around $3,500.
That's starting with Rounder record number 1, Rounder
Mhm.
Playboys record number 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the final record on that contract, it was 7 or 8.
That was before Bayou Ruler?
Yeah, that was Trace of Time.
Oh, that was Trace of Time. It was before La Toussaint. Okay.
Um,
7 or 8,000, you said?
Yeah.
Trace of Time?
So then the next contract, it starts at 7 or 8, it goes to 12. The next contract starts at 12, ends up at 18.
Would the band go over budget in the actual recording?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and would Rounder pay it?
Yeah, I mean there was usually this like confrontation sort of call. We just can't get the record done for this amount of money.
Okay.
It was easier when like Scott Billington produced,
Oh, I see.
because he was at Rounder and
Oh, I see. Because
Yeah.
he'd be okay. He'd be making the call from the studio.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, recording costs have just consistently inflated, and as the material has gotten more complicated, it's required more money and it's more time and money in the studio.
So the band thinks that's going to go away, and they learn that it doesn't. And there's still constraints on them. I kind of got you off your train there.
Yeah, and there's often this bitterness of, like, when they get the first statement, they're like, damn, we only, in the first 6 months that the record was out, our royalties were only $1,000, and it costs $9,000 to make the record.
Right.
We're never going to make any money.
Yeah.
They must be screwing us somewhere.
Oh, you don't mean you're talking about net royalties or gross royalties from which they've got to start deducting this 9,000 over time?
Well, basically how it works. Like, there's a recoupable budget.
Yeah.
So if the recoupable budget or the amount ended up being $9,000,
The cost of the record?
right?
Okay.
That comes out of the artist's royalties.
Right. So when you say, damn, our royalties were only $1,000, are you saying the record's all paid off now because the record pulled in $10,000?
No.
And hey, you're saying with the gross royalties, what I'm calling gross royalties, were $1,000. That means we're going to get we've chipped away at this debt 1/10.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I see there. That's where you say we'll never pay it off. It's going to go on forever.
Right. So, yeah, there's that sort of disconnect between the understanding of the true economics of what's going on, and just not a lot of communication at all. So for the most part, the band having very little understanding of why it's taking so long for the record to recoup, and they see all these deductions, and it's hard to understand. So there's that aspect of just the record company providing the capital.
Yeah.
But there's other naivete, which is just that the record company is the one who sells us to the world. They're the ones who make all the magazine articles happen. They put ads in the magazines. They do all the radio work, so that it's amazing how the artist thinks from their world. And what they want to do is they want to roll into Toledo or whatever, and when they're driving into town, hear their song on the radio, and open up the newspaper when they get to the gig, because there's a rack of newspapers right beside the door of the gig. So even before they've loaded in, they want to open it up and see a big article about themselves and the fact that they're going to play tonight. And when you're putting out a new record and you're out there on the road, you're doing all that work to get to another level.
Yeah.
Because you're really excited about your new record. You want to get to the next level, and so the agency has built up a lot of excitement and said, yeah, it's a new record. Rounder is going to promote it pretty heavily, and they're going to buy some radio time, and they're going to do some co-op ads with the local retailer. And all these things that are supposed to happen, when they don't, there's this feeling of, why are we even working with this label?
Right.
Because they're not making these things happen. We're out here staying in Motel 6 in some grungy hotel room, and they're going to have a litany of excuses about why this stuff didn't happen.
Right.
So there's that sense from the marketing angle that it's going to happen, that the label is going to try to make something happen. And then finally there's distribution, which is that if I walk into a cool record shop, I'm going to see all my records there.
Yeah.
And also from the perspective of the artists doing their own artist sales, that and they'll easily access copies of their own titles so that they can sell them on the road, because that's a big, big cash concept, part of what it means to be on the road.
Right.
And that pays a lot of bills, selling your own stuff. So, at one time I thought the great thing that Rounder does is you can be a traditional artist and have very little sense of the whole industry, the mechanism of being a business person. And they're going to do what it takes to send you a box that has 30 shrunk-wrapped units of retail that represent, as pleasurable a listening experience as technology will provide at this time, day and age. And they're doing that for traditional music.
Yeah.
I mean, for music that you don't have to jump through all the hoops and make all the compromises that you'd have to do just to get the interest of a major label.
Right.
And they do it fairly extensively. They have a machine that gets these records to every public radio station across the country, that gets it, 2 copies of it to every Tower Records retail position in the country, and those sort of things. And for many years it felt like, that's what Rounder does, and there's nobody really that does it quite as well, and it's worth it. But obviously that's sort of changed.
Right. Well, in January 1997, you thought they weren't doing something well.
Yeah, I mean, the patterns have... there's been a lot of... they've tried to shake things up and learn a lot of new ways to do business, but it's amazing how a culture perpetuates itself within a company. And they just keep disappointing people in the same ways, no matter what happens there.
And what are they? Well, also you started this aspect of our talk by saying these are the things an artist expects from a record company, and I thought you were going to go and tell me, but that's unrealistic. That's what an artist expects. I'm not sure you've gone there. You still sort of seem to be saying that this is what a record company should be doing, and it's what Rounder has done reasonably well, but isn't doing well.
Okay, so like at one point when I had a meltdown with Rounder, I went in saying, these are the things that in multiple emails I've coordinated with you guys and that you said that you're going to do for me. And that all was based on those expectations.
Right.
And so I present Rounder with my expectations, and they say, okay, this person will take care of that, this person will take care of that. And so I start pushing those channels to make these things happen that I expect the record company to do.
Right.
And for the most part, the harder I pushed, the more of those expectations that were met.
Okay.
In other words, I made myself the squeaky wheel. But it was through intense diligence on my part to basically be the advocate for the Playboys within Rounder.
Right.
To get to know the personnel in the departments and who does what so well within the company that I could put it right on the front desk of the person who will do that work that day.
And you're talking about getting into a town with some radio interviews set up, making sure the records are in a local store, that you have sufficient show table copies to sell. Those are the things you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And also having and this was something that Ken did really well to help manage my expectations and start to bring me into a greater level of knowledge about how the industry works. He said, okay, you need to come here and you need to spend a day or two meeting with all the people that you work with regularly. And I guess essentially strategy. What we need is more strategy rather than throwing a lot of work at us when we're not prepared for it, we haven't planned for it ahead of time. If we have a strategy, if we have a launch campaign for the record that's been hashed out ahead of time, and all those expectations are managed a little better, then things can go more smoothly. So I did that, like I guess it was for Bayou Ruler. We had extensive meetings really sat down and talked about what we could do with the record. For the most part, things did go more smoothly, but it's just not going to happen without there being a point person who is spending a lot of time managing Rounder.
Okay.
Rounder's not going to, they're not going to make a particular title happen without a very strong-willed manager
Okay.
forcing it to happen. And coincidentally, it's not just Rounder. That happens at the major labels.
Okay.
The relationship the manager has with the major labels dictates what the machine ends up doing for that particular artist.
When you refer in this memo to some things that are self-evident, the difficulty of a rigorous release schedule, obviously. If they put out too much product, where do they direct their selling efforts?
Yeah. No doubt, by me being such a pain in the ass, lots of other stuff that warranted work by Rounder
Right.
was neglected.
Okay.
But, so it's sort of survival of the fittest
Right.
at Rounder.
Okay.
Yeah, they were putting out a lot of records, and Joe Wilson used to say, Rounder puts out records like people throw frisbees. They just throw those CDs out there like frisbees, and whatever happens to them happens. I mean, it's economically, as a business model, I have no idea how Rounder survived.
Uh-huh.
It really is pure luck, by pure luck. You throw enough shit out there, well, not shit, but you throw enough good music out there,
Uh-huh.
some of it's going to stick somewhere, and that's going to pay all the bills for all the other stuff you put out. That's Rounder's business model. And I mean, to their credit,
Well, good. You've just reestablished their hippie credibility, which lots of people will attack.
Right. Yeah. They've tried to get more sort of MBA-ish about it, but so far it looks. And I went up there to do a sort of expectations meeting with them on this latest Playboys release.
On Happy Town?
Yeah, just because I was in Boston and I told the band that I would do that for them, try to get it rolling.
How long ago was that?
It was in January.
Okay.
And so we had a lot of conversations about like using digital download tools like through Liquid Audio to try to build up some buzz for the record online. And it was just frightening to me that the old pattern somehow, even with a totally new cast of characters, had been reestablished, which was, okay, this person has told me in 2 weeks they'll have me such and such. 4 months later, still can't get an email back from them.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of old round of frustration that just drives people nuts. And it seems like the old patterns haven't been solved.
Is it a function of just not hiring people who have a sense that I am in a business, I'm going to meet schedules, I'm going to be a professional?
No, not at all.
What is it?
I mean, it's everyone. There's nothing. No one at Rounder is stupid.
I didn't think they were stupid.
No. I mean, it's not like they're inadequate, that they're doing their job poorly. I think it probably has to do with the confusion of the core partnership. The fact that the people who own that company only interact in certain ways with the company. And then they sort of hire deputies like John
Right.
to hopefully get things really happening.
Right.
I know that there's been this kick, I've gotten the sense that there's been this kick to sort of marginalize Ken, to make him, to put him in a position where he can do less harm, but the thing that he's really good at, to give him more time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a weird thing, because anytime a person commands that much respect and they're one of the partners and the owners of the company, to put them in a position where they're only in charge of certain things, it still doesn't delegate the accountability
Right.
that I was talking about in that email. there's just not that sense. There was always a feeling at Rounder that people could pass the buck and not take charge and really hold on to a certain part of that company as their total responsibility, and therefore make it happen or you're out.
Do you see there's just weak management? There's management that doesn't want to crack the whip. That's one way of saying it, but there's other ways of saying it, but I mean, that are kinder, but just weak management in a sense, where you don't see that your people follow through on tasks and have a clear idea what their tasks are.
Well, you're asking an MBA,
Yeah,
like a
well.
very broad question that I could talk for hours about.
Okay.
But to me, if I were given the opportunity to critique the company, I would say that it's, in a way, it's weak management, but it's also micromanagement.
Okay.
In other words, it's weak delegation,
Okay.
and they could really hand off certain aspects of that company. And if they allowed these talented people to run with it,
Uh-huh.
they might have better results. So maybe it's poor corporate management understanding. You know, how do you motivate people, and how do you get the best out of people?
Well, that I've heard a lot.
Mhm.
Poor. How do you sense? You alluded to this perception that Ken is doing harm in certain ways. What kind of harm are you referring to? And I know it's not you talking, but you're picking up some vibe from
Yeah.
the company that Ken is doing harm and has to be prevented from doing that harm. What is that harm?
I think it's purely just at the nuts and bolts financial aspects of the company. That whenever he took part in financial negotiations or sort of policy decisions at that level of the company, it seemed like he would piss people off a lot. Whereas when he was involved artistically, when he did purely A&R sort of things and was just out there finding new bands, that's where like he could do some good work, and where he had a sense of what was happening with the tradition and who the young artists were that were going to be that had the greatest impact. Felt like he had a real natural instinct there that was very good.
That's interesting. So you're sensing that it's in an area where Ken is getting involved in finances, because I never had much sense that he was. In your experience, did you get deeply involved in that with the Playboys?
No, he wouldn't get
Budgets?
deeply involved, but the level of involvement that he had was often it just hurt the relationship.
I see. Okay.
It's just hard because artists would go to him because the buck would stop with Ken
Right.
about a lot of these financial items and negotiations of various aspects. And the way Ken handled those would have been better handled by somebody with professional finance and had a better sense of how to handle those types of decisions. But I don't know.
Well, it's
I guess I'm
it's amorphous
being
area.
theoretical about something that
Yeah.
probably don't have enough information to really know.
What was the Winnipeg problem, if you remember? I know this is a long time ago. You were sure.
Oh, I do remember. That was a total meltdown that we had with Rounder because we played on the night stage for 14,000 people, and
The what stage?
the night
At
the
a
evening
festival,
performance,
evening performance at a festival. Okay.
Winnipeg Folk Festival,
Right. Okay.
huge
Right.
record-selling opportunity. Not just for financial gain, but just if you sell 200 records, you make a lot of money. But 200 people now own your music,
Right.
and much better chance they're going to buy your next record.
Right.
They're all the impact just on career that is caused by people buying your record. And we had a great set there, but what happened was I did all the paperwork to make sure the product would be there, like a couple weeks ahead of time, and then didn't sit on every detail of it.
Uh-huh.
I said to Rounder, here's stuff, make sure that we need X amount of it's a whole customs things that you have to go through when you play in Canada.
Okay,
Very
and you're talking
difficult.
about the band stage copies to sell at this point of show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And,
a huge opportunity for them to sell a lot of units,
Yeah,
as well as for us.
right.
So, no, it didn't happen, and there were some sort of vicious attacks on both sides.
Right.
You know, I was really upset about not having it,
Yeah.
and I wanted some sort of, I wanted Rounder to take the kind of accountability that would cause them financial loss because they'd made a mistake.
Okay.
In other words, I was saying to them, you're never going to fix this problem if this failure of yours doesn't cost you $1,000.
Okay.
I made up some number.
Theoretically, the money you would have gotten from point-of-stage sales, I mean, that's the underlying rationale, but it didn't matter.
Mhm.
You just wanted a number. It was going to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my feeling was, if you don't take responsibility for this, you'll never fix it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we could have gotten along without the money.
Sure.
It's not like, I mean, clearly I lost money and I was upset about that, but I wanted to make a real statement to them about that this is a real impact. Your fuck up
Yeah.
has a real impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way to like not make these mistakes again.
Right.
And they were just like, well, it's your problem.
Did you ever get that kind of recompense? No. No. You make a reference in here to the way Green Linnet handled Filet in a positive sense.
Mhm.
What's the point of comparison you're making? What was,
Well, just like those expectations
mhm.
and seeing them happen to a certain extent for Filet with the release they did with the Green Linnet.
Okay.
You know, there being somebody at Green Linnet making the kind of calls.
Mhm.
It's not a lot.
Yeah.
To get posters in to retail, I mean, it's all just shepherding of details that you hire people to do, and
Mhm.
it happens every day in the industry. And they were obviously getting direct work for that particular artist from the record label.
Okay.
And I was saying, you know, if a rinky-dink label like Green Linnet can do this, and you're
Right.
not doing this for us,
Right.
you know, there's something broken.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like, Rounder feels like they can do more by keeping their marketing in-house, all their marketing and radio promotion in-house. But they have a huge overhead because
Yeah.
they have this marketing department, and they hire people, staff people, and pay salaries. So they have all these huge costs, and Ken will say something to me like, every record we sell, $2 of that record goes to the marketing.
Mhm.
You know, so like, marketing costs $1 million, and we sold $6 million. So therefore, we can postulate that it costs $2 per record.
Right.
So those kinds of numbers, oftentimes in business, like they'll say, let's outsource everything so we know exactly what each record costs.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I was trying to get that kind of, if it's gonna cost $2 per my records,
Right.
I want those $2 only working on my record.
They didn't do any in-house time examinations of
Like a cost accounting,
who's spending time on what record, how much, you know.
they would
I
say it's
imagine-
virtually impossible. It is
I would-
possible to do.
Okay, I would think it would be tough because people are calling radio and talking about several records, I
Mhm.
gather. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ken feels strongly about that the work that they're doing is better focused than any outsourced thing could be, but it's not in the artist's interest because
Sure.
they don't have any accountability for what actual work was done on their behalf.
Right. The interesting thing is if you outsource all your records and a lot of them are going to the same market, you're setting up competing businesses in a sense.
Yeah.
Within your own catalog. I don't know if that may be good. It's good for the artists.
Yeah, I mean, that's the classic sort of conflict. Scalability.
Yeah.
And Rounder obviously has scalability because they're doing their own marketing,
Right.
and they think that they can market 50 records per year through the same marketing department,
Right.
when in actuality there's a limit. They
Right.
probably really only market 10.
So you were up there in January talking about Happy Town, and so it's more recent than I thought it would be in terms of your experience with them on selling.
Yeah, I mean, it was a snapshot because
Right.
out of the picture, but
How have things changed? I mean, I'll understand with that caveat, because everyone out there, you and I have talked about the Glenn Jones incident and
yeah.
what that means behind it in terms of the people they're bringing in and how that,
Mhm.
but has anything changed? Or was it more of
Well, to them, they were excited at that time because they felt they had sort of turned over a new leaf. There'd been a long sort of internal cancer that had been removed, which was this bitterness over this labor dispute and all that.
Oh, really? They felt that had lingered a lot inside?
Yeah, and that it was something that had held down the entire company, and now they'd finally reorganized so that was no longer a factor, and they brought in some new people. And a lot of them had come with major label experience.
Who were you talking to in January, by the way? Who was you meeting with?
It was with Ken, Shelley, Paul, this guy Glenn. I don't know any of these guys' last names.
Glenn Foley?
Yeah,
No. Paul Foley was the guy who fired
Paul-
Jones.
Paul Foley.
Yeah, he's the guy who fired
Right.
Glenn Jones, yeah.
But there's a Glenn,
I don't know who that is.
somebody else now,
Okay.
who's doing a lot of the promotion stuff. So
Uh-huh.
it was some new faces, a new cast of
Yeah.
characters, and with not a lot of familiarity of the history of the Playboys with Radner,
Mhm.
but having this feeling that here is one of our most legitimate artists,
Right.
that we've played a big role in creating their career, and what can we do next for them.
Right.
So, and Scott now has sort of been given this executive position. He's sort of in charge of all A&R now,
Uh-huh.
from what I understand. And so there was an enthusiasm there of maybe we can turn things around
Uh-huh.
and become much more of a professional organization. But